There are moments when the night feels long and our thoughts drift toward places we have never visited. Imagine yourself sitting quietly, taking a deep breath, then releasing it slowly. Let your body feel the softness of the chair or the bed that holds you. Let your eyes half close, yet remain aware of the voice flowing softly. There is nothing to chase tonight, no burden that must be carried until tomorrow. There is only a story that will guide your imagination, slowly but surely, until it brings you into peace where sleep feels near. The night has its own way of soothing, just as the earth always embraces, giving us space to linger without needing to answer anything. As you listen to this tale, do not force the mind to remain alert. Let it drift like water, flowing calmly among the stones. There is something restful in the rhythm of a story, even when its contents may be dark or unfamiliar. Not all tales are created to give answers. Some exist simply to be companions for those who wish to rest. This is not a story of heroes or victories, but of the remnants of ancient humans who left their marks in stone. In blood and in whispers we can no longer hear. Do not hurry to search for meaning may never be found. Let this mystery rest beside you, like a thin blanket covering your body when the night air begins to grow cold. And now, slowly, let us part the curtain of time, allowing ourselves to walk far into a past so strange. Imagine the earth still wild, the sky darker than we know it now, and humans, just a small handful, surviving with wit and instinct. There were no cities, no roads, no lights, except the fire they guarded with effort. From there, this story begins, a long journey into an age when stone was not just a dead thing, but a weapon, a tool, and a witness to something deeper. An age when blood was spilled, not only in the hunt, but also in rituals that remain only as shadows within archaeology. Calm yourself even further. Let the breath grow longer and more steady. With every exhale, imagine the burdens of thought falling away little by little, like dry leaves carried by the wind. The night is not an enemy. It is a guardian that arrives bearing a dark blanket so the body can rest. Listen to the sound that seeps into the silence. No need to resist, just let it enter like water slowly soaking into the earth. The story we are about to follow is not meant to disturb harshly, but to guide gentle steps along a fog-covered path. Every word will become a soft foothold. Every pause, a place where you can stop and feel the heart that remains loyal. There is no demand to understand. Simply let imagination sail, for this tale will wait for you even if your eyes fully close. Life has always walked alongside mystery, and humanity from the very beginning has been familiar with a faint sense of fear. Imagine the ancient fire that blazed at the center of a circle. Weary bodies sitting around its small flame, their eyes alert to the sounds within the darkness. There were no walls to protect, only instinct and fragile firelight. Within their heartbeat was the desire to survive, but also the need to believe in something greater than themselves. The tale of sacrifice and blood we are about to enter was not born of chance, but of trembling before a nature that could never be fully tamed. And now, as you slowly sink into calm, imagine sharp stones, struck and sharpened until they could cut the skin of animal or man. Imagine rough hands gripping them, not only to hunt, but also to perform rituals only they understood. Each shard of stone was not merely a dead object, but also a symbol of belief born from uncertainty. Ancient humans believed that spilled blood could restore balance, that unseen spirits could find peace if they were offered sacrifice. We cannot know if it was true. We only know its traces remain, imprinted on bone, on earth, on stones, stained by time. Imagine stepping back thousands of years, long before calendars were invented, when time was not counted by numbers, but by the rising and setting of the sun. Archaeologists call this the Stone Age, an era when humans did not yet know metal, when everything depended on stone, bone, and fire. Yet for those who lived then, there were no scientific terms to explain it. There were only days that came and went, seasons that changed without restraint, and awe toward a nature greater than themselves. Across wide plains, in valleys heavy with fog, or inside caves whose walls dripped with dew, life moved slowly but with constant uncertainty. Some places still preserve puzzling traces. There are caves with walls full of paintings, stones standing upright alone in open fields, and bones buried alongside sharp stone tools. No one truly knows why prehistoric people placed such objects with the dead. Was it a sign of affection or a ritual to ensure the departed carried weapons into another world? Each layer of soil unearthed always leaves behind more questions than answers. Even when science attempts an explanation, the shadow of mystery remains. On certain nights, if we let imagination open, it feels as if we can still hear the echo of their steps. The sound of stone striking stone, creating simple chimes, the crackle of fire, and the sound of wary breathing. The world then was so quiet, yet behind the silence there was always the whisper of fear. For them, every shadow could be a predator, and every flicker of light could be an unseen spirit. That age feels so distant, yet through the stones and bones that remain, we can still sense the faint pulse of their lives. And from here, the tale of blood and sacrifice began to weave itself, slowly forming myths that never entirely disappeared. Around 10,000 years before modern calendars began, the land was still covered in dense forests, vast grasslands, and rushing rivers. The last ice age had only just receded, leaving glacial scars across great boulders scattered on the earth. In such a landscape, small groups of humans lived as wanderers, carrying fire, stone tools, and beliefs passed down without written words. They had no cities, no kingdoms, and no permanent houses, yet their footprints pressed into the soil, leaving signs of a long journey across the earth. In some regions, massive stones were raised into circles or rows. Some call them astronomical monuments, while others suspect they were sacrificial altars. No records can confirm this. Only remnants of charcoal, bones, and fragments of stone tools remain. Elsewhere, caves are filled with paintings of great beasts, mammoths, bison, giant deer, and strange figures not entirely human. Were these mere imaginations or depictions of something truly seen? Even now, each red or black stroke on the cave walls carries an alien feeling that defies full explanation. Even more mysterious are the mass graves uncovered in certain valleys. Bodies buried in layers, often with wounds marked upon their bones. Among them lie stone tools that seem less suited for hunting and more for harming other humans. It is as though on a night thousands of years ago, a ritual unfolded. Blood was spilled, and cries vanished into the wind. Yet who performed it, and for what purpose, no one truly knows. Researchers can only speculate, while the shadow of that event lingers between stone and soil. Among the remains left behind, there are also small objects often overlooked. Beads made of animal bone, delicate carvings on small stones, or fragments of seashells somehow found far from the coast. These raise questions. Did prehistoric people travel great distances just to bring symbolic items? Or was there a hidden meaning we may never understand? Some archaeologists suggest they were part of death rituals, offerings for the soul's journey to another world. Others believe they were mere ornaments, signs of group membership, or protective charms against unseen forces. Whatever their purpose, these small objects are like silent voices, still trying to speak from the depths of time. When night falls in such places, the silence feels different. The wind passing through the cracks of the stones seems to carry echoes not of this world. Grass sways gently, and the shadow of the moon casts standing stones into the shapes of giant figures standing guard. It is no wonder that in the oral traditions preserved among certain societies, stones are often considered living beings, mute witnesses to secrets older than human memory. And indeed, though thousands of years have passed, there remains something in that silence that makes us feel we are not entirely alone. Imagine a morning in prehistoric times when the sun slowly rises behind low hills and thin mist still hangs over the plain. The cries of ancient birds, unlike the chirping we know today, sound hoarse yet rhythmic, as if marking the beginning of a new day. By the side of a small river with clear flowing water, a group of prehistoric humans begin to stir from their resting place. They do not have houses with walls and roofs like ours, but simple shelters of branches and animal hides put together roughly to keep out the night wind. Their bodies are chilled, yet accustomed to it, for cold is a part of daily life that cannot be avoided. These people move slowly, unhurried, knowing that every movement in the morning must be measured against the energy needed for the day ahead. Some small children run across the grass, laughing in short bursts, unaware that hunger can arrive at any time if the hunt fails. The women busy themselves checking woven baskets made from plant fibers, ensuring that the containers are strong enough to carry fruits, tubers, or roots they might later find. Meanwhile, the older men crouch, observing the sky and the wind, trying to read signs that to us might seem like coincidence, but to them are crucial clues for knowing where the large animals might be moving. At the riverbank, one man sharpens the tip of his spear with flint, his movements repetitive, slow, yet full of care. Every tiny crack in the stone must be considered, for a single mistake could cause the spear to break when used. There is a long patience here, one that can only belong to those who live with the awareness that time does not belong to humans, but to the earth itself. That morning, like every other morning, holds nothing extraordinary. Yet within that simplicity lies a silence that makes us, observing from afar, feel as though life here flows at a different rhythm, a rhythm slower, yet somehow deeper. As the sun climbs higher and the morning mist fades, the small group slowly separates according to their tasks. The women, together with children too young to hunt, walk toward the low forest filled with shrubs and trees bearing wild fruits. They carry woven baskets strapped to their backs, while their hands occasionally brush aside branches in search of edible leaves or tubers. In their steps lies a habit passed down from previous generations, an instinctive knowledge of which plants can be eaten and which are poisonous. There are no books or writings to guide them, only long experience and the scars left by mistakes of the past. Meanwhile, the men with long spears and a few stone tools leave the riverbank and move farther into the open plain. They do not run, nor do they stroll idly, but move cautiously, preserving silence as though every footstep could alter the fortune of the day's hunt. In the distance, large animals are still faintly visible, perhaps ancient deer or thick-furred bison. To the hunters, these animals are not only a source of food, but also symbols of success that preserve the honor of the group. Yet they also know that in every attempt to chase great beasts, there lies risk, for antlers and hooves can be deadly threats. Hunger never fully disappears from their lives. Even when the stomach is full, there remains the awareness that tomorrow may be different. That luck can abandon them at any moment. This is why every step is filled with seriousness. Nothing is done half-heartedly, for the smallest mistake could mean returning empty-handed. Along the way, they pause briefly to sniff the air, listening for faint sounds that might come from the movement of animals. Or perhaps from another danger, such as predators lurking in the brush. No one ever truly knows, and perhaps that is what makes every moment feel like part of a long game between life and death. The gentle wind across the open plain becomes the deciding factor, and the hunters know they must always remain on the proper side, so that their scent does not drift toward the herd. With backs bent low and eyes sharp upon the distance, they move slowly, sometimes crawling among the tall grasses, sometimes stopping entirely to blend into long stretches of silence. Their breaths are held, no words are spoken, only small signals through hand movements or fleeting glances. In the distance, a great male deer stands apart from its group, its antlers rising like the dry branches of trees etched against the sky. This is the chance they have been waiting for, and every second feels heavier than the one before. The spears they hold are not mere tools, but extensions of their very bodies. Each sharp stone at the tip of wood has been honed for days. Every fiber of sinew binding stone to shaft chosen carefully, so that it will not fail in the critical moment. In silence, they watch the animal, study its steps, guess its direction, and try to feel the rhythm pulsing within its body. The deer lifts its head from time to time, listening to the wind, as though aware that something unusual lingers. The hunters freeze, becoming part of the earth, part of the wind, part of a world unwilling to reveal its secret. Time passes slowly, yet within their hearts the beating grows faster. There is fear, but also hope, a delicate tension between life and death that always dwells in the hunt. If the spear misses, the herd will scatter and the day will end in hunger. If it strikes true, flesh and fat will give them strength to endure the long days filled with uncertainty. At last, one hunter raises his spear. his body trembling not from weakness, but because his body understands the weight of what is at stake. He exhales gently, then prepares to release the weapon that could change the fate of his people. The spear flew from the hunter's hand with a speed almost unseen, only a fleeting blur of wood and stone slicing through the air. The silence so long preserved was suddenly torn by the brief hiss of flight, followed by the thud of the ancient deer, startled and leaping high. Its cry echoed across the wide plain, startling birds into flight from the grasses. Other animals in the herd scattered in panic, but the great stag remained behind with a spear lodged in its side. Blood began to flow, thick and red, dripping onto the dry earth that until now had only known the weight of footsteps without the stain of life spilling upon it. The hunters shouted softly, not in full triumph, but as a cry to hold their courage steady. They ran at once, their feet striking the ground in unison, chasing the deer that still tried to flee, though its body was badly wounded. Another spear was raised and cast with full strength, deepening the wound and slowing its stride. In their eyes, blood was the surest sign of success, a color that never failed to quicken the heart and bring relief. Every drop upon the grasses marked the promise that their stomachs would not be empty tonight. Yet hunger was not the only companion in that moment. There was also a strange reverence, as if they were witnessing something greater than a hunt. The animal ran with the last of its strength, its antlers still raised high, its eyes filled with fear and pride. The oldest hunter gazed at it long, as though wishing to remember the final face of the stag before its strength was fully spent. A quiet belief lived within him that the blood sinking into the earth nourished not only men, but also the soil, feeding unseen spirits. When at last the deer collapsed, its breath torn away into the cold air, silence descended again. Not as emptiness, but as a shroud closing the end of a long dance between man and beast. When the ancient deer lay still, the hunters did not rush forward carelessly. They paused, standing around the body still warm, allowing time to place a space between the cries of pursuit and the silence after death. Their breath came heavy. Sweat ran down their brows, yet their eyes fixed upon the beast, now lifeless. Blood continued to seep slowly, soaking into the soil, tracing red lines that mingled with dust and trampled grass. Something bound them to that moment, a faint awareness that though they were hunters, they were also witnesses to the passage from life to death. Witnesses to a transition that could never be fully explained. The eldest among them stepped forward first. He approached with slow movement, kneeling beside the deer, and touched its antlers with roughened fingers. No words were spoken aloud. Only a low murmur fell from his lips, like a prayer without language, merely sounds inherited from long ago. The other hunters bowed their heads, letting the sound seep into themselves. To them, this was not simply an animal subdued, but a gift from the earth, from the unseen spirits who permitted that blood to fall before them. After a while, a young hunter came forth, carrying a blade of sharpened stone. His hands trembled slightly, not from cold, but from reverence mixed with unease. With a subtle sign from the elder, he bent low, pressing the blade into the body of the deer. The soft tear of skin breaking was heard, marking the beginning of what had to be done. No one spoke. Only the sound of wind and distant birds accompanied them. The metallic scent of blood filled the air, sharp to the nose, and though it was a smell long familiar to them, still it carried something sacred. They knew, before fire touched flesh, before hunger was eased, there was a small ritual to be fulfilled. The first portion was not to be eaten, but returned to the earth. One hunter lifted a small piece of meat and blood, letting it fall upon the soil near the deer's head. The gesture was simple, yet every eye watched it with solemnity. No one truly knew who first taught it, and no one dared to abandon it. As if without that offering, the meat would be tasteless, the stomach remain empty, or perhaps misfortune would shadow their steps. After the small ritual was done, the hunters began to move more freely, as if an unseen weight had lifted from their shoulders. One gathered the dry twigs tied at his waist, while others searched for larger wood to keep the fire burning through the night. They worked with little speech, only hand signals and glances serving as their main language. The sound of flint striking was heard. Small sparks danced in the dark air, then caught on dry leaves prepared beforehand. A tiny flame came alive, growing slowly, and as if it had a soul, it spread, licking the wood, becoming a pulse of warmth in the chill of night. Bodies once tense from the hunt began to relax. They sat in a circle, letting their hands stretch close to the fire, feeling frozen skin slowly soften. Smoke rose skyward, carried by the wind, then vanished into darkness, like a message sent to a place they would never see. The freshly cut venison was placed above the flames. A soft crackle was heard as fat kissed the embers, releasing an aroma both sharp and stirring to the belly. The scent filled the air, mingling with the damp earth and burning wood. Stomachs empty since morning growled faintly, yet none dared to touch until the elder gave his sign. When the first piece of meat was cooked, the elder lifted it carefully, then placed it upon the ground, not to be eaten, only left there as an added offering. Then he took another piece, tearing it with his hands, dividing it bit by bit. The warm meat passed from hand to hand, and the hunters bit slowly, letting the salty, bitter taste mingle with smoke in their mouths. The sound of chewing was calm, as if each bite was part of a longer prayer. Around them, the night remained wild. The wind carried the cry of wolves far away, perhaps drawn by the scent of blood and meat, yet unwilling to near. For the circle of fire was a boundary they would not cross. Night birds called now and then, and the sky, filled with stars, seemed to watch the simple feast. The hunters did not see themselves as masters of the night. They were only guests who stopped briefly, taking what was permitted, then moving on again. Fire, meat, and togetherness were the only things that made them feel safe, if only for that night. The fire kept pulsing, casting red light on weary faces, and once their stomachs were slightly filled, soft voices began to rise. None spoke loudly, as if the fire itself was an ear that could carry their words into another world. They spoke of signs in the sky, of a star brighter than usual, of clouds shaped like beasts, and of the strange cry of a bird earlier that morning. To them, these were messages, not coincidences. Every detail in the world was considered a whisper from spirits. to be understood so that life would not stumble into unseen dangers. One young hunter pointed eastward, toward a star he claimed seemed to move faster tonight. His eyes glimmered, full of conviction that it was no mere light but a sign of a great beast they must one day hunt. Another shook his head, calmly saying that the star was the eye of an ancestor, watching to ensure that the blood ritual had been done properly. The elder closest to the fire remained silent, his hand gripping the sharp stone used earlier to cut meat, pressing it into the ground, as if affirming that both interpretations could be true, or perhaps neither. Amid their talk, a knocking sound was heard in the distance, perhaps a fallen tree, or perhaps an animal stepping on dry wood. They all fell silent, turning toward the darkness, but none dared move beyond. The fire was protection, and they knew its circle was not to be crossed carelessly. The silence lingered briefly before the conversation returned, this time deeper, about the meaning of the blood that had flowed from today's hunt. They believed blood was not merely a fluid of life, but a bridge between the human world and the spirit world. Each drop opened a passage that could bring blessing or disaster, depending on the sincerity of the prayer that accompanied it. Some began to recall old stories, tales of hunters long ago who failed to offer sacrifice, then were haunted by endless nightmares until they vanished into the forest without trace. Ancient names were spoken, stories unfolded slowly, accompanied by the hiss of fire and the crack of wood. In the shifting glow and shadow, their faces looked like carved stone, stern yet holding secrets never spoken plainly. That night, around the fire, they were not only eating and warming their bodies, but also seeking to understand their bond with powers far greater than the beasts they hunted. After the old stories were spoken, the voices around the fire softened, falling quieter until they became whispers blending with the night wind. The fire flickered, casting shadows that danced on the dark walls of the forest, as if the faces of ancestors had joined them. No one felt the need to fill the air with words any longer, as though every sentence had been enough and the rest should be left hanging. That night was filled with a subtle vigilance, not fear, but an awareness that something was watching from within the darkness. Night creatures might have been running in the distance, but they believed those sounds could just as well belong to spirits, unsatisfied with the blood shed today. Some hunters began to lie down, resting their backs against stones or logs, yet their eyes did not fully close. They heard the rustle of branches, the faint strike of insects against leaves, or simply the sigh of wind passing through. Each sound was taken as a message, though no one knew how to read it. The elder, who had remained silent now, closed his eyes and drew a deep breath, as if weighing whether to speak or keep his words until the morning. When the fire sparked, his face caught the light, and the lines of age across his skin looked like maps of long journeys, not only in the visible world, but along roads unseen. Then silence truly took over, broken only by the crack of wood and the fall of embers. The moon slowly rose, its dim light enough to reveal a thin mist creeping across the ground. That mist moved gently, as if tracing the blood left on the earth after the hunt. The hunters who remained awake stared without words, unwilling to move, as though the mist was the hand of a spirit searching for its path. No one knew if it would enter their dreams tonight or pass silently, leaving only a cold trace that defied explanation. In the stillness, the fire continued to burn. Its small circle of light, the only border between humankind and the darkness filled with secrets. As eyes slowly closed one by one, the world shifted into another layer that could not be explained with ordinary words. Sleep was not a clear divide between reality and shadow, but a thin doorway that could open in any direction. The hunters who drifted into slumber began to hear sounds unlike those of the waking forest. Sounds that came not from outside, but from deep within the mind, or perhaps from spirits roaming nearby. In dreams, the fire still burned, but its flames were taller, its red deeper, and its shadows shaped figures that moved like humans, yet bore no faces. These figures did not speak. They only stood and observed, as if measuring the courage of those still bound to the world. Some dreams brought them back to the hunt of that day. They saw the deer fall, the spray of blood, the animal's eyes frozen in its final moment. Yet the details shifted, no longer merely animals pursued, but forms resembling humans, bodies bent with wounds, eyes hollow and staring, vanishing into mist. No cries, no footsteps, only silence that made the vision feel heavier. In their sleep, their hands reached for spears, but the spears became sharp stones marked with dark stains, as if holding the history of sacrifices older than human memory. These dreams layered upon one another, moving from forest to river, from river to cave, from cave to vast plains lit by a moon too bright to be natural. They saw rows of stones standing taller than any man, arranged in circles, with fires burning around them without wood, flames rising straight from the ground. At the center stood a tall figure, its head crowned with antlers like a deer, its body shaped like a human. The figure was not frightening, yet not comforting either, simply stood, raising its hand as though asking for something unspoken. The hunters in that dream could only watch, uncertain whether they were being summoned to give or being called to follow. The dreams that followed no longer held shapes that could be easily recognized. Human faces slowly shifted into animal snouts. The bodies of hunters merged with the fur of wolves, and their voices turned into growls, not entirely alien, yet no longer human either. In that state, they ran across vast plains, following a moonlight that seemed to move, guiding them toward something unknown. Each step felt lighter, lighter than a human body should be, as if their spirits had slipped free from flesh, leaving only restless energy that could not cease moving. Around them, other beings ran alongside deer with glowing eyes, great birds flying low with wings sweeping the ground, and shadowed figures without clear form, moving only as shifting silhouettes. There was no fear, only a strange bond pulling them further, faster, without end. At last, they reached a cave whose entrance was filled with red paintings. The images moved, never still, as though the blood that formed them was still wet, slowly flowing across the stone walls. There were handprints, animals with long antlers, circles merging with spirals like a sun in motion. They tried to touch them, but their hands passed through the walls. And suddenly, their entire bodies fell into a darkness with no bottom. There was no light, no sound, only the endless sensation of drifting, as though time itself had stopped and only they remained aware within the void. From that darkness came a sound, not loud, not clear, but deep. It used no words, only vibrations felt directly in the chest, making hearts beat faster for no reason. It was the sound of the earth's pulse, or perhaps the pulse of something older than the earth itself. The voice that rose from the darkness grew deeper, as if coming from the earth's core, not from a single point, but from every direction at once. At first, it was only a vibration that made their bodies tremble slightly. Then it lengthened into an echo, resembling a song without words. That song felt ancient, older than language, older than names, even older than the stone that formed the cave walls. They could not understand it with their minds, but their bodies responded with subtle movement shivers, or small motions, as if trying to imitate a rhythm they could not fully grasp. Slowly, the song shifted into patterns, at times rising like a breeze, at times falling like the roar of a deep river. Within the boundless darkness appeared faint shapes, not faces or bodies, but forms that constantly shifted. At times it seemed like a great beast with wings. Then it transformed into a tall tree with dangling roots, then spun into a glowing circle. These forms never stayed the same, yet they always carried the sense of being watched by something not entirely visible. Each time the shapes drew near, their chests tightened, as though their hearts struggled to match an unfamiliar rhythm pressing from outside. There was a trace of fear, but stronger than that was submission, the sense of standing before something greater than life, greater than death, something they could not oppose. At last, the sound seemed to pause, leaving behind a silence so heavy it pressed against their ears. In that silence, every breath sounded deafening. Every heartbeat struck like a hammer against stone. Then slowly, the sound returned. This time, not merely vibrations, but a series of tones that almost resembled a calling. They did not know whether it was a command or only an echo from a vanished age. Yet within their hearts grew a strange compulsion to follow an unseen direction, as if the sound was opening a path toward something hidden beyond the visible world. As the echoes continued to swirl in the air, the cave walls, once only dark and damp, began to reveal something different. A faint light, whether reflected from the torches or emanating from the stone itself, slowly unveiled carvings that had previously been hidden. These were not random scratches, but symbols carefully arranged into circles, spirals, and shapes resembling eyes, hands, and animals no longer known. It was as if the wall itself were the page of a book never written in ink, but inscribed with the buried essence of life. The symbols seemed to shift subtly, though the stone remained unmoving. The longer they gazed, the more convinced they became that the marks were alive, breathing, and watching. Some of the symbols felt inviting, like open doors, while others radiated menace, warning them not to proceed further. Yet the sound they heard, that ancient song, pulsed in rhythm with certain symbols. Each time the tone rose or fell, one of the carvings seemed to tremble, glowing brighter than the rest, as if pointing the way. Those within the cave exchanged glances, none daring to speak a word, yet hesitant steps carried them closer to the brightest section of the wall. Tentative fingers reached out, and when touch finally met stone, it was as though something shifted beneath the hard surface. The wall felt warmer than expected, almost like the skin of a living being. From the etched lines, a small glimmer sparked, then spread into thin, glowing veins, like illuminated streams of blood. These streams traced the spiral, converging upon the largest circle at the center. From there, a soft light radiated, not blinding, but calming, making their bodies feel lighter, as if the weight of the world had briefly been lifted. Yet within that calm was something unspoken, a promise or a warning, that their step had just crossed a threshold from which return would not be simple. The light focused on the circle grew steadily stronger, though still gentle, until the wall that had once been solid began to ripple like water stirred by a breeze. Those standing before the symbol held their breath, for what they saw was no longer hard stone, but a liquid surface that could be passed through. The torches they carried cast strange reflections on it, as though flames danced with the shimmering waves. Then a sound emerged, faint yet unmistakable, not from the ancient song, but from the stone itself, a sound like a long exhalation finally released after being held for thousands of years. In the stillness, a narrow fissure opened slowly, forming a doorway that split the wall. Beyond it lay a darkness thicker than before, a space untouched by firelight, waiting for whoever had the courage to step forward. They exchanged glances, no words spoken. Yet there was a pull, not mere curiosity, but a subtle force urging them ahead. One step was taken, and a breath of air rushed outward from the opening, cold and metallic, like the scent of long-dried blood. The torch flames wavered in protest, flickering as though uncertain whether to continue burning. Slowly, they passed through, and behind them the liquid wall sealed shut without a sound, leaving them enclosed within a different world. The chamber was larger than expected, like the carved belly of the earth. Its ceiling rose high, vanishing into shadows, while from afar came the steady drip of falling water, the only music to accompany their footsteps. The floor was covered with flat stones, arranged deliberately, not by nature, but by human hands, or perhaps by something older than humanity itself. At the chamber's center stood something faint yet vast, a form not fully clear, but monumental, like an altar or shrine. As they drew closer, it became apparent that what stood there was not merely stone, but a statue of a being with an unfamiliar face, immense eyes, and elongated side. Jaw and hands raised upward, as if awaiting something descending from the sky. As they drew closer to the giant statue, the flickering torches revealed details once hidden in darkness. The stone surface of the figure was covered in carvings, not mere decoration, but repeated scenes. Small humans were depicted marching toward an altar, some kneeling with bound hands, and others shone with drops falling from stone blades into bowl-shaped vessels. The carvings were so precise that even the tiny faces bore frozen expressions of fear, captured forever in stone. From beneath the statue ran a narrow channel carved into the floor, long dry now, but darker in color, as though for ages it had carried liquid that was not only water. Stepping nearer, they discovered more markings on the ground. A wide circle had been etched around the altar, with branching lines spreading outward like rivers, each ending at small holes in the stone floor. All branches converged at a single point, a rounded basin directly before the statue, resembling a vessel of offering. The air felt heavier here, as though the walls still held echoes of screams once heard in this place. No sound lingered except the steady drip from the ceiling. Yet the silence only made the vision more vivid, as though old cries remained suspended in the air. One among them reached out to touch the statue's surface and felt a chill unlike ordinary stone. The cold seeped into bone, as if the statue were not lifeless matter, but a body retaining memory. For a brief moment, there was a faint vibration, unclear whether from the earth or from the stone itself. The hand was withdrawn, yet the chill remained, setting the heart to race. The torches flickered once more, and in the wavering light, the statue's face seemed to move, its great eyes appearing to glint, though made of stone. None dared speak, but the weight of their gazes grew heavier, for they understood this was not merely an empty chamber, but a place where blood had once flowed, perhaps many times, perhaps for centuries. When the torches were directed toward the corners of the chamber, the floor that had seemed flat revealed tiny cracks filled with fragments of bone. Not all the bones were wholesome or broken. Some so fragile they crumbled with only the breath of heated air from the flames. A few were small, perhaps from animals, but others bore the shape of human hands and fingers, their joints still visible, though whitened by time. Amid the bones lay shards of clay vessels, decorated in simple patterns, as though once used to hold something of importance. Some vessels still bore dark stains inside, and when touched, a faint, strange odor emerged. Those who saw them exchanged glances, for the deeper the chamber was revealed, the clearer it became that this was no mere site of symbolic ceremony. The traces of blood, bone, and offering vessels spoke of repeated acts, not a single event. There was a deliberate pattern, a purpose maintained across long stretches of time. The floor near the altar was worn smooth, not from ordinary footsteps, but from something done again and again in that same place, whether laying down bodies or dragging them. Small holes around the altar contained red-colored stones, perhaps mineral, or perhaps something thicker once seeped into them. On the far side of the room lay a flat stone, carefully placed on the ground. When shifted aside, beneath it was a collection of other objects, beads made from bone. Animal teeth pierced to form necklaces, and small flint knives still sharp, though impossibly old. The blades reflected the torchlight with a cold gleam, unpleasant to look upon for too long. There were also fragments of charcoal that endured, a sign that fires had once burned here, whether for illumination or as part of ritual itself. Together, these discoveries formed a picture that could no longer be ignored. This chamber had been the stage of real sacrifice, where human and animal bodies alike were offered, where lives ended in devotion to something whose true purpose remains unknown even now. After longer study, a realization slowly emerged that this chamber was not solely a place of sacrifice, but also a kind of center for keeping time. The carvings on the walls, once thought mere decorations, followed a repeating pattern, straight lines and small circles arranged in specific numbers. When carefully counted, the number of circles matched the lunar cycles within a year. Certain marks were carved more deeply, as though to highlight particular moments deemed important, perhaps hunting seasons, planting times, or moments when sacrifice had to be made to keep the balance of nature intact. The objects found beneath the flat stone seemed to align with this pattern as well. The bone beads and animal teeth were likely not mere ornaments, but markers or counters, shifted one by one to measure the passing of days or months after a ritual event. The flint knife might not have been just a slaughtering tool, but also a symbol of a specific phase in the calendar, representing the threshold between one cycle and the next. Even the remnants of charcoal could have come from ritual fires lit only on nights, when the moon stood in a position considered sacred. The longer they observed, the clearer the connection between these signs and the night sky became. The small holes around the altar were arranged in a pattern resembling a constellation. When a torch was held at a certain angle, the shadows on the wall connected those points like lines in the heavens. It seemed the chamber was meant to bind not only humans to earth and blood, but also to the sky above. The ancestors who built this place may have believed that by spilling blood at certain moments in the cycle of time, they maintained balance between the seen world and the unseen. For them, every sacrifice was not simply a death, but part of the great rotation that bound sun, moon, stars, and earth into one breath. Imagine for a moment their life outside the cave before their footsteps carried them into that silent stone chamber. Their days were filled with simplicity, yet heavy with burdens that never ceased. On cold mornings, when dews still clung to the wild grass, they would leave their resting place, no more than a shelter made of branches and animal hides. The women busied themselves gathering fruits, roots, or tubers they knew were edible, while the men departed in small groups, carrying spears tipped with freshly sharpened stone. Children followed behind, learning to read tracks on the ground, mimicking bird calls, or simply playing with pebbles. Though unknowingly, all of it was training for survival. When midday arrived, the heat pressed down, yet rest was not guaranteed. They waited for animals to pass, tracked through dense forests, or walked across open plains in search of prey large enough to feed the group for several days. Each successful hunt was greeted with quiet joy, a soft song shared only by the fire. Yet failure was just as common, and when hunger echoed within their bodies, their eyes turned toward darker possibilities. They believed that sometimes nature closed itself, withholding game, hiding fruit in the forest, and could only be reopened with blood. That was why their steps returned to the cave, to the stone chamber etched with marks not everyone could understand. At night, as the fire burned and moonlight fell to the earth, stories were passed from mouth to mouth. Elders sat with children and spoke of great creatures that once walked the land, of beasts with fangs longer than a human arm, or of giant birds whose wings could eclipse the sun. Some of these tales were likely fables, yet others perhaps carried fragments of memory from ancestors who had encountered those prehistoric animals. Each story ended with the same reminder that the world was not always kind, and only those who knew how to honor nature would survive. In this way, The cave and its stone chamber became the heart of their existence, a place where stories, fears, and hopes met in a silence laced with blood. Preparations for a ritual were never done hastily. Every step seemed guided by traditions handed down like an unwritten script, carefully remembered by all. When the group decided the time had come, they began gathering what they considered essential. No one truly knew who first decided that certain leaves must be chewed, or that a particular stone must be placed at the cave's entrance. Yet these acts were carried out with unshakable belief. Women prepared animal hides crudely stitched together to cover their bodies, decorated with red stains from clay or the blood of hunted animals. The men sharpened their spears again, not for hunting, but for carving marks on bodies or stone. Children were told to sit quietly, to watch and learn, as though they knew one day they too would have to do the same. The fire was lit earlier than usual, not merely for warmth, but to summon something older than themselves. Smoke rose into the air, mingling with the scent of dry grass thrown into the flames, producing a pungent, intoxicating aroma. Someone began to murmur in a low voice, repeating words heard since childhood, though no one truly understood their meaning. The murmurs grew louder, weaving together into a chant, a circular rhythm that drew all minds into a single point. In that moment, it was as if the space around them was no longer just forest and earth, but a doorway to something unseen. When all preparations were complete, they moved toward the cave. Their steps were heavy, yet certain, as though a magnet pulled them forward. The elders walked in front carrying torches made from dry branches, while the younger ones followed with faces tight with tension. Every sound of the night, whether the howl of a wolf or the cry of an owl, was taken as a sign, either warning or blessing. Upon reaching the cave's mouth, they paused, pressing their palms against the cold stone that seemed to throb with life. A long silence enveloped them until one of the elders raised a hand, signaling readiness. From that point, there was no turning back, for everything they were about to do within the stone chamber could only unfold in a profound silence, a silence filled with whispers of the past. As they stepped into the cave, the air grew denser, as though every breath carried remnants of centuries past. The cold stone walls glimmered faintly in the torchlight, revealing rough etchings, whether intentional or merely scratches of time, no one could say. The smell of damp earth and soot filled their senses, mingling with the pungent aroma of herbs thrown into the fire earlier. Footsteps echoed, multiplying in sound, making even the smallest noise seem larger than it truly was. Torches were lifted high, illuminating the towering cave ceiling where bats hung in silence, as if they too bore witness without interference. They gathered in the main chamber, a natural hollow, wide and open, its floor scattered with smooth, cold stones. At the center stood a simple altar, nothing more than a large stone, its surface blackened with ash and stained with patches of red, whether from animal blood or something else, no one could be certain. The elders moved forward, arranging the objects they had carried: bones of animals, fragments of wood, and sharp stones once used for cutting flesh. Each item was placed in a specific pattern, forming a circle believed to be the link between the human realm and the unseen one. When the circle was complete, the group sat around it. The murmurs returned, this time more ordered. A rhythm repeated again and again until it resembled the hum of bees. Children closed their eyes, attempting to follow the flow, while the adults lightly struck their own bodies with open palms, producing a sound that merged with the chanting. The oldest elder then lifted a sharp stone, drawing a line of blood from his own hand onto the altar, as though opening the first door toward something deeper. There were no cries, no dramatics, only a simple act performed in calm. Yet beneath that calm lay something weighty, a burden that stretched beyond a single life. As the murmurs grew louder, the torches lining the cave walls seemed to move of their own accord, their flames trembling as though dancing to the rhythm of human voices. Shadows stretched across the stone walls, swelling into great shapes that bent and lengthened, as if unfamiliar beings were watching from within the darkness. The people closed their eyes, allowing their ears to fill with the monotonous hum that made their heads feel light, as though carried along by the steady flow of a river that never ceased. The children clung to one another, some drifting into sleep while sitting upright, as if the sound itself were a delicate net slowly drawing them into unconsciousness. The eldest elder stood, his voice rising slightly as he spoke words long memorized yet never fully understood. The words had no meaning in any language we know today, but they were preserved as inheritance, believed to summon something older than humankind itself. His voice resounded throughout the chamber, bouncing off every crevice of the cave, making it seem as though countless mouths were speaking together. The vibration was felt in the chest, in the bones, even deep within the stomach, as if the cave was not an empty place, but a massive body breathing with them. Herbs were once more cast into the fire, this time producing a thick bluish smoke that veiled much of the chamber. The smoke rose slowly, forming a thin curtain that blurred the torchlight. Through the haze, shadows appeared more alive, resembling figures that no longer belonged to humans. Some swore they saw the faint movement of ancient beasts' great horns, sharp teeth, and wings that had no place in the natural world. Yet no one screamed or fled. They sat in silence, letting their eyes be deceived, for they believed what they saw was only a reflection of another world. A temporary window opened by blood, fire, and the ancient words. The smoke grew thicker, shrouding much of the chamber until the torches appeared as faint lights trapped behind a curtain of mist. The elder's voice grew heavier, his tone rising and falling like the waves of the sea crashing endlessly against the shore. From the darkness came a sound not born of human mouths, a low, vibrating noise resembling the restrained snort of a great beast. Everyone froze. No one dared to open their eyes or move, only listening as the sound spread throughout the chamber, as if something unseen was circling among them. Within the smoke, a shadow darker than the rest emerged, its form indistinct, only a thickness of blackness deeper than the surrounding dark. Some perceived it as an animal, others as a towering human figure, while still others swore it had no fixed form, shifting like the current of a river. In that moment, their heartbeats quickened, their chests felt heavy, as though the air had grown denser and harder to breathe. Yet they remained still, for this was the moment awaited when the human world touched the other. The elder raised a sharp shard of stone, staining its tip with fresh blood from the sacrifice already made. He held it toward the shadow, not as a weapon, but as an offering. The fire crackled loudly, as if in response. Some felt the cave floor tremble faintly, as though something was rising from within the earth. Whether it was real or only hallucination, no one could say, for smoke, sound, and light had merged into one, deceiving the senses. But they believed that in that instant, the door between the seen and the unseen had opened. The shadow moved slowly, not with footsteps, but like thick smoke flowing with the current of air. Yet its presence was so heavy that everyone there felt pressure on their shoulders. Some began to cry without sound, tears running down their faces uncontrollably, while others trembled, though the cave air was already freezing cold. None dared to open their mouths, for they believed a single word could sever the fragile link between this world and the thing that was arriving. The elder circled his hand in the air, turning the sharp stone that now glistened with dark red blood. Its edge gleamed as if absorbing the firelight, then reflecting it back in a strange hue, neither red nor white, but a pale green glow that seemed alien. The shadows seemed to draw nearer, not with a physical form, but with a presence that pierced directly into the minds of each person. They saw no face, no eyes, yet each felt as though they were being watched from every direction. In the silence that became almost unbearable, another sound emerged, not from the elder, not from any human, but from within the chest of everyone present. The voice whispered, yet rang clear, a language unrecognized, a mixture of hums, breaths, and the echo of stone. Its words were incomprehensible, but its meaning was felt, carrying the sense that they had been summoned, that whatever was to happen next was no longer theirs to refuse. The fire flared brightly, then dimmed at once, leaving the cave in a chilling half-light. The whisper grew clearer, no longer a passing foreign sound, but like a refrain repeating, resembling a song without melody, yet filling the chamber. Those present heard it in their ears, in their chests, even within their own heads. None knew if the person beside them heard the same words, for when their eyes met, only vacant stares were exchanged, unwilling to speak. The elder closed his eyes, his face lined with deep wrinkles, as if straining to recall something he had heard many seasons ago. The message, if it could be called that, spoke of a link, a bridge opened between the world of men and something older than memory itself. The words made no sense, yet the hearts of those who listened understood in ways beyond explanation, as though their very bodies absorbed the hidden meaning. Some began to weep, not out of fear, but from a sudden surge of loss, as if they had already surrendered something before knowing what would be taken. The fire in the center of the cave trembled again, its flame rising sharp as though blown by a wind that was not there. The smoke coiled upward, forming a strange circling pattern, tighter and tighter, until it resembled an endless vortex. From that spiral flashed a brief spark, like a star falling and extinguishing, leaving behind a silence deeper than before. Everyone lowered their heads, as though the cave had become a place where the outside world no longer held sway, and the old rules, unwritten yet binding, were now being enforced. The swirling smoke thickened, layer upon layer, wrapping the air in shapes no longer random, but forming a hidden pattern slowly revealed. From within the vortex, a dim light appeared, fading, then flaring, pulsing like the slow beat of a heart. Gradually, a vague figure emerged, neither human nor beast recognizable. Its face seemed carved from cracked stone, its body resembling a shifting shadow, yet standing tall. Those who looked could not decide whether it was real or merely an illusion born from their own minds. The elder kept his eyes shut, his lips moving silently, as if speaking directly to the apparition. The young hunters held their breath, their hands trembling, though they grasped no weapon. The women at the edge of the cave bowed their heads, unwilling to lift their gaze. Fearing the figure might return the look and uncover something within them that should remain hidden. The atmosphere grew heavier, the air pressing down, chests tightening as if bound by invisible cords. Then a faint sound rose from the vortex. No whisper this time, but a low vibration, like a massive stone being slowly dragged. The sound seeped into their bones, making their bodies tremble from within. Some wished to flee, yet their legs felt rooted to the ground, unable to move. The figure stared, though it had no eyes, as if perceiving beyond ordinary sight, piercing layers of the soul, searching for something that could not be denied. The figure that rose from the swirling smoke slowly lifted its arm, its movement rigid, like stone split apart and forced by an alien power. From the hollow of its shadowy hand, something glimmered, neither fire nor ordinary light, but a pale radiance that seemed to rise from the earth itself. The glow spread across the cave walls, making the carvings seem alive, shifting gently as if breathing. Symbols that had long been still now quivered, their lines pulsing, forming streams like rivers of light encircling the chamber. The cave's inhabitants who witnessed this could only remain silent. Hush! Their bodies stiff, their eyes wide open, unable to blink. The elder remained calm, his face unchanged, though his skin appeared paler, as if drained by an unseen force. He opened his mouth, and for the first time, sound emerged, hoarse, flat, yet clear. The voice was not heard only with the ears, but directly within their minds. The words were incomprehensible, a language older than anyone's memory, yet each syllable shook their hearts, spreading a chill through their bodies. Some children began to cry softly, but even those cries seemed to dissolve into the resonance of the elder's voice, which spoke either to them or to something unseen. Suddenly, the glow within the figure's hand grew brighter, engulfing almost the entire chamber. They all shut their eyes, yet the light pierced their lids, pierced their skin, even seemed to pierce their bones. In the darkness behind their closed eyes, each person saw something different. Fragments of strange visions. Some saw vast plains with thousands of standing stones. Others saw a red river flowing beneath a swollen moon. Still others saw the shadow of a human body lying surrounded by blood. None could tell whether these were illusions, ancestral memories, or warnings from something older than their world itself. When the light finally dimmed, the vortex began to dissolve, leaving behind only the acrid smell of smoke and a silence far more terrifying than any sound. When the last light faded, the cave seemed to return to its original darkness, Yet something had changed. The stones on the walls still glimmered faintly, as if they had absorbed and stored remnants of light within their veins. The atmosphere grew heavy. The air they breathed seemed denser, as though each inhale carried fragments of memories that did not belong to them. The elder still stood in the center of the circle, but his eyes were empty now, staring into a distance that no one could fathom. It was as if he was gazing beyond the cave, beyond the hill, perhaps even beyond time itself. No one dared to approach, for his body looked fragile like a dry leaf. Yet from him radiated an aura that held everyone in their place. The children who had cried earlier were now silent, their faces pale, their gaze seemingly connected to something unseen. The hunters lowered their heads, trying to calm themselves, while the women clasped each other's hands tightly, afraid that if they let go, they would be pulled into the lurking darkness. The echo of the elder's voice still lingered in their heads, light fragments of whispers repeating without meaning, yet carrying a rhythm that inspired dread. Some began to notice that the carvings on the glowing stones no longer appeared as before. Their lines had shifted, forming new shapes, like faces never seen before, or eyes staring back at them from within the stone itself. Among them was a young boy, still too innocent to fully grasp the meaning of fear. He stepped forward, his eyes fixed on one of the carvings that now shone more brightly. The symbol resembled a circle with 3 lines piercing through it. But as he stared longer, the circle began to move, its lines spinning, forming a small, glimmering vortex. From within that vortex came a faint sound, like a soft whisper, different from the elder's voice, more like a call. The boy slowly raised his hand, nearly touching the stone, and as his finger hovered just an inch from its surface, the vortex pulsed, sending a wave of light that spread across the cave walls. Everyone held their breath, and once again the chamber was filled with radiance, though this time it was not a strange light, but one resembling the calm reflection of the moon. The light that filled the cave this time was not blinding, but calming. As if the stone walls reflected the soft glow of the moon, the shadows of the cave dwellers merged with that glow, making them part of the ancient carvings that now pulsed with life. The elder still stood rigid, his body trembling slightly, his lips moving without sound, as if reciting words that only those who had transcended this world could hear. The eyes on the carvings, once empty, now seemed to glisten as though life itself was pressing out from within the stone. No one knew if it was merely an illusion of the light, or if something had truly been trapped there all along. The boy who had nearly touched the vortex felt his hand trembling. He was not afraid, instead wrapped in a warmth that slowed his heartbeat, so unlike the restless pounding inside the chests of the adults. The whispers from the vortex grew clearer, not in any known language, yet filled with a soothing rhythm, resembling a lullaby that no human had ever taught. Slowly, he lowered his hand, and the vortex continued to pulse softly, casting its light in gentle rotations across the chamber. At that moment, one of the oldest hunters knelt, pressing his forehead to the ground. He whispered a prayer, the old chant usually recited for protection before the hunt. One by one, the others followed, their voices blending in low tones, filling the cave with vibrations like distant waves. Yet, The longer they prayed, the stranger the echoes became. Their words seemed to bounce back from the stone walls, reshaped into other sounds. No longer prayers, but some kind of reply. The carvings on the walls began to merge, their lines forming larger patterns, coiling like the roots of a tree, spreading in all directions. From the heart of the vortex appeared fleeting images of a figure, difficult to describe, not entirely human, not entirely beast, but something in between. The vision lasted only a moment, but it was enough to silence their prayers. The cave fell quiet once more, with only the soft, pulsing glow remaining, as if waiting for someone to understand the message it carried. The air inside the cave grew heavier. Each breath seemed to draw in layers of time, clinging to the stone walls. At last, the elder opened his eyes, which had been shut. And in that gaze, everyone felt as if they were looking at something no longer part of the ordinary world. His stare was vacant, yet filled with a faint glow no human could possess. He spoke, but the voice that emerged was not his own. It was a deep echo, as though resounding from the oldest depths of the earth. The words were untranslatable, but their vibrations caused a strange sensation across the skin, raising the hairs on the neck while also bringing an inexplicable sense of peace. The people crouched down, some with eyes closed, others staring in fear, uncertain whether what they witnessed was a blessing or a curse. The boy who had nearly touched the vortex now sat still, his eyes wide, staring at the elder without blinking. He heard the voice like a song he had once encountered in dreams, a song that always left him waking with a hollow feeling, as though something vital had been missing from him. No one could understand how the sound could be identical to what had existed only in his sleep. Then the vortex pulsed once more, this time much stronger, causing the ground to tremble slightly, shaking dust loose from the cave ceiling. The echo of the elder's voice ceased, and in the long silence that followed came a sound like a great exhalation from deep within the earth. It was as though the cave itself was alive and had only just awakened from its long slumber. The dwellers of the cave looked at one another, but none dared to move or speak. All simply waited, as if awaiting a decision they themselves could not make. The carvings on the walls had now changed, their lines no longer rigid, but seeming to shift slowly, forming new images never before seen. The shape resembled a great circle surrounded by smaller figures, human-like, yet with elongated heads and hands that held torches. The circle glowed faintly, giving the impression that behind the stone lay something far larger, like a window opening into another world. The glowing circle gradually became clearer, as if the hard stone had turned into the trembling surface of thin water. The shadows within it were no longer carvings, but appeared like real landscapes stretching far beyond the cave. A wide valley appeared, with a fire burning at its center, and around the fire stood tall, slender figures with faces obscured by mist. The people inside the cave held their breath, realizing that what they saw was not crafted by human hands, but a mirror of another world, whether of the past or an unknown future. None could tell. The elder remained silent, his body rigid, only his eyes fixed unblinking on the circle. His lips moved, yet no sound came forth, as if he were speaking to something that existed beyond the glowing screen. Small children began to cry softly, quickly hushed by their mothers, though fear also lingered in their hearts. A strange feeling crept through the chamber, a mix of dread and an irresistible curiosity. Some of the adults even felt as though invisible hands were drawing them closer, urging them to step into the circle, even as instincts screamed for them to remain still. Time within the cave seemed altered, seconds dragging into slowness, each blink of an eye stretching into long minutes. The circle quivered, and from within came faint sounds like singing, though from no mouth it emerged. The song flowed without words, only tones deep and floating, entering the ear and spiraling within the mind, making everyone sink into the same rhythm. No one dared break the atmosphere. Even a cough or the smallest movement felt like it would shatter the fragile balance that had taken hold. At one long, drawn-out moment, the circle reflected the shadow of a woman with long hair streaming, though no wind stirred. Her face was unclear, only a faint silhouette. Yet her eyes shone with a pale light that pierced the hearts of those who saw her. She slowly raised her hand, as if giving a signal or invitation, and in that instant, many within the cave felt an urge to rise. Yet their feet seemed bound, as if the earth itself forbade them from stepping forward. The figure of the woman within the circle of light remained silent. Yet the slow movement of her hand felt like a summons that could not be denied. A young man, one of the boldest hunters, stepped forward without realizing it. His breath was ragged, his eyes vacant, as if he no longer saw the cave around him, only the trembling light before him. Others held their breath, some trying to reach out and stop him, but strangely, their own bodies felt heavy, difficult to move, as though frozen by the air in the chamber. The woman's glowing eyes never turned away, fixed upon them all. Yet it felt as if they touched each heart differently, awakening memories or emotions long buried. The young man finally stopped at the very edge of the glowing circle, his body trembling. From within the light came faint sounds, clearer now, though still in no language that could be understood. The tones were like soft whispers, at times like song, at times like long breaths. For a moment the light dimmed, and all thought the vision would fade, yet instead the glow stretched outward, reaching the cave walls where moving images appeared upon the stone. They were not mere carvings, but living scenes, like reflections upon water, showing ancient humans performing rituals in that very place thousands of years ago. There was a great fire burning, bodies dancing around it, and hands raising sharp stones dripping with blood. Faint screams echoed from within the light, though no mouth opened in the cave. Everyone felt the hair on their necks rise. Their chests tightened, but not one dared to close their eyes. They witnessed sacrifices carried out by people who might have been their own ancestors. And somehow that alien feeling mixed with the awareness that they now stood in the same space, watching the replay of a path long buried by time. At last, the elder lifted his staff and struck the ground 3 times. The sound of the blows echoed like distant thunder. The light quivered, the woman's shadow slowly faded, and the song ceased abruptly, leaving a silence heavier than before. Yet before vanishing completely, The woman's eyes cast one last look, deep and sharp, as if leaving behind an unspoken message. That message clung to every heart, making them feel not only like witnesses, but as part of something far greater. Something that perhaps could never be explained in words. After the light vanished, the cave was once again wrapped in darkness, and only the flickering torches remained trembling upon the stone walls. The sound of breathing grew heavier, mingling fear with relief, yet no one truly dared to speak first. The young man who had nearly stepped into the circle of light now sat collapsed, his body trembling without end, his eyes fixed blankly on the ground, as if still seeing something others could not. Two men approached him, trying to calm him, but every touch was futile, for his body remained stiff as stone. The elder stood pale-faced, clutching his staff tightly, as if afraid to lose his grip. He closed his eyes briefly, then spoke softly, that what they had witnessed was not merely a vision, but a summons from the past. His words made the air within the cave heavier, as though the stones themselves pressed upon their chests. Some began to weep silently, others bowed their heads in prayer. Though the prayer sounded uncertain, as if they no longer knew to whom it should be offered. A few of the younger ones, whose blood still burned hot, felt drawn instead. They whispered among themselves that perhaps the light could grant them power, that the radiant woman might bestow upon them the ability to protect their tribe or even conquer greater lands. Yet such whispers deepened the fear in others, for they knew the history passed down always hid a price to be paid whenever great power was offered. There is no power without sacrifice, and the cave had already shown proof with the bloody shadows on the walls. The atmosphere shifted into a blend of whispers of ambition and whispers of fear. The torch flames grew smaller, their smoke clinging to the low ceiling, making the air all the more suffocating. Eyes turned toward one another, filled with questions of whether they should leave and bury the secret forever, or return and seek deeper knowledge. No clear answer came, only the thundering of their own heartbeats echoing in their ears. In that silence, all realized the division had begun to grow quietly, unseen yet certain, like roots spreading beneath the earth, ready to tear apart the ground beneath their feet at any time. When they finally emerged from the cave, the night was waiting with a profound silence. The stars were scattered above, yet their light felt cold, like distant eyes observing without offering answers. The wind that blew across the plain carried the damp scent of soil and grass, but within its breath lingered a faint whisper, as though the cave was still calling them back. Some walked quickly toward the camp, eager to forget what had just occurred, yet their steps sounded heavy, as if even the ground beneath them was reluctant to let them go. The elder paused at the cave's mouth, staring into its darkness without uttering a word. His staff pressed against the earth, his body leaning forward as though listening to something others could not hear. A moment later, he turned, his face appearing older than before, lined with deeper creases and shadows of weariness. He spoke little, only instructing everyone to guard their tongues, for not every secret deserved to be told. His words made the night feel heavier still, like a weight pressed against each of their chests. The young ones who had whispered of power now fell silent, yet the small flame within their eyes had not entirely died. They carried questions in their hearts, wondering if that light could one day be theirs, if the radiant woman awaited to be summoned once more. While others tried to close their eyes and calm themselves, these few remained awake longer, pondering ways to rediscover the path toward the secret they had just brushed against. In the stillness of night, two roads opened before the tribe, one steeped in fear, to leave the cave behind forever, and one steeped in ambition, to return and demand something from the darkness. No one knew which path they would choose. Only the shadows of fire remained in the camp, dancing upon slowly burning wood, shaping strange forms reminiscent of those seen within the cave. It was as though the world outside and the world inside now mirrored one another, waiting to see who would step forward first. That night ended without an answer, only with a lingering sense in the air. A sense that their history had just cracked, and that crack might widen at any time. That night finally faded into a cold dawn, and a thin mist descended, shrouding the wide plain where the tribe rested. No one spoke of the cave. No one mentioned the light or the shadows, as though all they had experienced had been nothing more than a long dream, never entirely real. Yet beneath the silence, that feeling remained, clinging to the air, seeping into the earth, settling into memories that could not simply be erased. The sharp stones of the ancient age still lay scattered around them, tools once used for the hunt, and blades that had tasted sacrificial blood. No one truly knew whether those sacrifices still demanded, or whether the light within the cave would appear again to answer. The day moved slowly, yet within the heart of each person there was an emptiness no campfire or breath of wind could fill. Children returned to their play. Adults resumed their preparations for the hunt, and the elder remained seated in silence, yet every line upon their faces carried something unspoken. It was as if time itself had paused for a moment before that cave, then resumed again, leaving them with an unseen burden. When the following night arrived, the stars appeared once more, and the campfire danced again. But in all their eyes, there was a different feeling, the sense that something once buried had now been awakened. No answer came, no certainty, only a silence that slowly closed in like a thin blanket over weary bodies. And perhaps that was how it was meant to be, that mysteries were not meant to be solved, but to dwell beside humans to accompany them in sleep, to fill their dreams and to wake them with a lingering shadow. Thus the tale remains suspended, like a story whispered into the ears of children before they drift into slumber. No clear ending, only the glimmer of light within a cave, only the echo of footsteps in the dark, only the sense that the world held more secrets than could ever be spoken. And within that feeling, the tribe slept, surrendering themselves to the night, while the earth kept turning, carrying the mystery deeper into the folds of time, never offering an answer.